Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dueger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. Our guest today is Barbara Harper, an internationally recognized expert on water birth and gentle birth, who founded Water Birth International in 1988 to ensure that water birth is an available option for all birthing parents. During the past 4 decades, Barbara has worked as an obstetric and pediatric nurse, a midwife, midwifery instructor, childbirth educator, doula, and doula trainer, and has used her vast experience to develop unique seminars, which she teaches within hospitals, nursing schools, midwifery medical schools, and community groups worldwide. Her best-selling book and DVD, Gentle Birth Choices from 2005, is one of the top 10 recommended books for pregnant families and has been translated into 9 languages. Best known for her water birth certification courses, which more than 15,000 people have taken, Barbara has dedicated her life to changing the way we welcome babies into the world. She's the mother of 3 adult children, 2 of whom were born at home in water, and she's also a grandmother. So welcome, Barbara. We're so thrilled to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's an honor and a privilege to join your audience and give a little bit of insight into what I do.
For our listeners who may not know, what exactly is water birth, and what are the benefits of having a water birth?
From the very beginning, October 1984, which was the birth of my second child, first water birth. So this month is my 40th anniversary. He was born at home. I had built my own tub because nobody had heard of water birth in 1984. So I still remember that night with complete clarity. And I turned to my midwife and said, oh my gosh, I have to tell every woman on the planet how easy this was. And I haven't stopped talking about it. And I said in the very beginning that water was easier for women and better for babies. And today, 40 years later, we have the research and the science that backs up that statement, that it is easier, it's gentler, it's empowering, because your brain actually changes the brain waves. When you get into water, it creates 3 things. It creates comfort, and everyone in labor needs comfort. It creates peace of mind. It creates a stillness. The negative thoughts start disappearing. And I think the best gift that water gives us is deep, profound relaxation of the whole body, not just your uterus, but including your uterus. However, your uterus doesn't stop working because you're so deeply relaxed. That's one of the great gifts that water birth has given us, that everything works. Body, mind, and spirit come together in that fluid environment. The certifications that Water Birth International has given out have been in 79 countries, including China. I think we had the most people certified in China than any other place. I worked in China every year for a month or 2 months for 17 years, introducing water birth into over 40 hospitals in China. And yes, we did the occasional home birth. As a midwife, I've attended well over 1,000 water births in homes and birth centers and some hospitals as well. The gifts are numerous, and I hope today that I can give you some insight on what those gifts actually are.
Well, you're speaking to someone who is a lifelong competitive swimmer, and I had my 2 children at home as well and was in a birthing tub for part of those births. They weren't actually born into the water at the end, but both times I loved having a birthing tub. I felt like it was so relaxing for my whole being, my body, my mind, my spirit probably. Everything just settled, and it made it much more easy for me to be present. And I find that even when I'm not birthing, if I'm in comfortable water, I love the way my whole being just relaxes. And so maybe you could speak to some of those gifts that you just mentioned.
Yes, and let me delineate the differences. I call it water assisted labor and water assisted birth, because somebody might not have a birth pool set up until they're 8 or 9 centimeters dilated, and then they get in and they don't have the privilege of having labored in the water, and they go right into second stage, which is the birth of the baby. And the biggest gift in the birth of the baby and also water assisted labor is mobility, the ability to move in any direction. And Stephanie, I truly have witnessed miracle births where some women can be completely so relaxed, either through water or through hypnosis. And I know you've had hypnobirthing people on here, and I actually trained with Marie Bonk of hypnobirthing, and I've always been interested in the power of water to change how we perceive pain and how we deal with comfort. Because what the mind thinks, the body responds. And so when you get into water and you sink down, I call it the effect. You just kind of let go. Just think about your baths. And I'll say, can you raise your hand? Let's say I've got a group of doctors. Who likes to take a bath? Who likes to go swimming? Who likes to walk along the beach and hear the rhythm of the ocean? And there's not a single person that says no. We have to think back to the fetus growing in a bag that provides protection and warmth. That fluid keeps the baby's temperature constant. And the uterus itself and the placenta provide not only the warmth and the protection, but also the nutrition and the oxygen. And so when the baby emerges out of the womb into the pool, it's like going to an extension of the womb. It's warm, it's a protected place, and the baby, I'll get into this, but the baby cannot take a breath in this extended womb. It's performing and fulfilling its neurological behaviors exactly the same way that it did inside the amniotic sac. So I just call the pool a womb with a view.
I like that.
And the mother has that freedom of movement. So as the baby is descending through the pelvic area into the inlet and out the outlet, the mother can respond to that movement. She can perceive it more beautifully. And as the baby does this, she turns her body and does that. She's not strapped onto a bed without the benefit of moving to facilitate the movement of the baby, because this is a mutual exercise. And the baby is pre-programmed neurologically to leave the womb. And we've developed all of these techniques and things to speed the process, not take so long. And that's the next benefit. We have seen that being in the water reduces the time of both first stage and second stage of labor. So when I'm teaching doctors, I say it's a hands-off procedure. We see the benefits for the mother: freedom of movement, deep, profound relaxation. We change pain into comfort very easily. And for the baby, it's a gentler emergence from the womb to the world because you're not taking any drugs whatsoever. Drugs, the way that they're given today, are safe up to a certain extent because of the cascade of consequences that an epidural gives, restricting freedom of movement, keeping the pelvis in one place, the restriction of being able to drink and eat and do all those things that a normal birth requires. I tell people all the time that rediscovering the power of water was a gift for humanity in the late 1970s, early 1980s, because it showed us graphically all of the gifts of normal birth. And I'm talking about undisturbed vaginal birth, where a woman does everything. So I was at the University of Chicago Medical School, and the head of the medical school had invited me to come. This was early 2000. And this doctor raised his hand. It was medical students and physicians. And he said, okay, I get this. The mother labors in water. Her body moves with the baby. I don't cut an episiotomy. I don't deliver the baby. The baby just kind of swims out like a slippery dolphin. And I don't cut the cord. I leave the cord intact. And he paused and he said, so how do I justify my fees if I don't do anything? And there was this hushed silence waiting for me to respond. And I have to say, I went, oh, dear God, give me a good answer. It was a silent prayer. And immediately I said to him, does the lifeguard on the beach get paid if he doesn't have to rescue someone? And the midwives all started clapping. The doctors went, that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting comparison. And I said, and you must know what normal looks like. The act of laboring and giving birth in water increases the normalization of childbirth. It increases our awareness of what normal looks like, what normal sounds like, what normal feels like. And so that's the biggest gift, is that normalization. And so how can we increase the normalization of birth? Just add water.
That's a perfect segue. I think about the people who might have questions, the obstetricians and other people who might not be as familiar in their particular scope of the practice of childbirth. And we know, obviously, in life, there's no one size fits all for anything.
Especially birth.
Especially birth. Every baby has their own way of coming into the world, and every birthing parent has their own way of birthing. So who might a water birth not be suggested for? And are there any complications that show up that people might have concerns about?
Well, the original objections of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Academy of Pediatrics was, and I'm talking back in the 90s, when we first started putting water birth in hospitals in the U.S. The very first hospital was Monadnock Community Hospital in Peterborough, New Hampshire. They installed a bathtub that was deep enough, and you do have to have a certain amount of depth, no less than 24 inches of height, that is about 60 centimeters, in order to have enough water to assume any position. like to be on your knees or in what I call the proposal position. One knee on the floor, one foot on the floor, just like a partner is saying to his or her beloved, will you join me in partnership? So in that way, the mother is saying to the baby, I'm facilitating movement of my pelvis. So that hospital installed a tub that was deep enough. And one of the midwives at that hospital had come from the UK. The UK started water births in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And in the beginning, they saw great benefit from it. It was easier for moms, better for babies. And they started keeping track of their data, which turned into statistics. My good friend and colleague, Diane Garland, retired midwife from the Royal College of Midwives, she and I have taught together all over the world. She bringing the UK perspective, me bringing the US perspective. And her study comparing 2,000 water births with 2,000 bed births that were matched for age, parity, and even ethnicity tried to rule out those things that shouldn't be in the water. And the first objections, her study was published in 2006 in the journal Midwifery. But in the very beginning, the doctor said in the 90s, we have to have randomized controlled trials. We can't just start putting women in bathtubs and seeing what happens. But randomized controlled trials means that one woman is assigned to a bathtub and another woman is assigned to the bed. And until we improve our bed routines, the statistics are going to be skewed. And who is eligible? Okay. You're pregnant with one baby. The baby is head down. You're in your 37th to 42nd week, and you show no signs of skin, blood, or even respiratory infections that have not been treated. Well, the doctors originally said every baby is going to be damaged by water birth because as they come through the vagina, their lungs are going to expand and they're just going to inhale water. They did not take a professional physiology class with Dr. Paul Johnson at Oxford University because he published a paper in 96 that said to breathe or not to breathe. That is the question of water birth. And he answered it beautifully. But the doctors said, well, it's a possibility that the baby could drown, even to the point of publishing it in the American Academy of Pediatrics journal in 2002. And the title of that article is Water Birth, a Near Drowning Experience, where they looked at home birth to hospital transfers and said, well, this transient tachypnea was because the baby inhaled water. Dr. Jennifer Van der Lens, a PhD in midwifery, and she has her master's in public health. She has become the U.S. research analyst for water birth. She's a professor of midwifery nursing at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And her first meta-analysis that was published in 2018 looked at all of the published literature at that point, over 600 articles by 2018 that focused on mothers' experiences and perinatal outcomes. And she was just looking for the perinatal outcomes. There'd been a meta-analysis in 2015, a meta-analysis in 2016, one in the UK, one in Australia. She came up with the one that was published in 2018. And all three of those said the statistics for water birth, and this is how she told me. She called me up and she goes, Barbara, the outcomes for water birth aren't as good for babies born in water as they are on the bed. And I said, okay, tell me what you found. And there was this pregnant pause. And she goes, they're better. In every single parameter, they're better. So she didn't just stop with that 2018 meta-analysis. She went on and partnered with the head researcher in the UK, Dr. Ethel Burns, and Carla Feely, and her research partner, Patricia Hall, and they published in the British Medical Journal in 2022 a meta-analysis of 157,000 water births in the UK and in the US. And then in 2024, this year in June, the POOL study, the pool study, came out looking at 26 hospitals in the UK, all of their statistics. Over 60,000 women had either labored and or given birth in water. And the babies that were born in water, they looked at over 39,000 of them. Guess what? Same thing. Easier for mothers, better for babies. I got a letter in 1995 after I submitted a request to the practice committee of ACOG. Here's all the published research we have by 1995. Remember, I started in 84, and I couldn't find a single published article in 84. The very first one was published in The Lancet in 83 by Dr. Michel O'Donnell. And I sent them all of the articles and said, please give me your opinion. And they said, we cannot support this unless there are randomized controlled trials published in peer-reviewed journals in the US with populations of 10,000 or greater. And now we've got almost 40,000 babies born just in the UK that are in studies. And together across the world, we have over 700 peer-reviewed papers now. It's time to change their opinion.
So we heard a little bit about how it's easier for the mamas giving birth, and that makes sense. My experience is the water is supporting you, right? So you have that extra physical support, the ease of movement. It helps with pain management, things like that. And then baby is born. What are the positive outcome happens for the baby? Obviously, a more relaxed mama giving birth is going to be better for baby. But what did they find in that research that let them know that it was better for the babies?
Well, let's look at what makes a birth easier, difficult for the baby is complications. We saw less postpartum hemorrhage in the mother. We saw less NICU admissions. We saw babies that come out with eyes open, ready to connect, because those babies have a full complement of oxytocin and the right amount of endorphins and the right amount of norepinephrine, which is necessary for transition from womb to road. The things that happen in second stage prepare baby for life outside of the womb. And that transitional phase, yes, we have to begin breathing. And water babies, as well as breech babies, babies that are born with their butts burst, their head does not come out into the atmosphere the same way that a head comes out on the bed. And the stimulation for the cascade of changes from fetus to newborn in lungs, in skin, in brain, in digestive system, all of those markers don't begin until the face comes into contact with nitrogen molecules. Our atmosphere is 78% nitrogen and only 21% oxygen. And one of the benefits of that babies experience in water birth is that slow emergence. Their head comes up out of the water. They come to the mother's chest. I call this the sanctuary of the mother's chest. And they immediately connect with her heartbeat, for her breathing pattern, and they start to transition first as soon as that contact comes with the trigeminal nerve in the face, it signals the brain, welcome. You've arrived on planet Earth. You made it. You're in a body. Congratulations. Our breathing doesn't start until the shunts in the heart close and the blood supply that was diverted to the placenta through an intact umbilical cord now comes into the baby's body and is diverted immediately to the lung cells. And the fluids that were in the lungs are now drawn out because the capillaries that surround all 50 million lung cells engorge and become erect and can pull those surfactants and lung fluids out. That's in the lower lung. The upper lung, the upper airways, so to speak, the very first reflex that the baby expresses is swallowing. Why do they swallow? They swallow all of the good bacteria that's in the amniotic fluid as it's been coming through the vagina and it gets into the stomach, and they can swallow, they can spit. Babies that are not drugged through epidurals and narcotics like Stadol and fentanyl and things like that that the mother takes are in a much better position to transition normally. We don't have to pounce on them and stimulate them and make them cry. And some of these babies are so incredibly peaceful that they lift their heads and they look at their mother's eyes. And when the mother's eyes connect with the baby's eyes, the baby's amygdalas turn on in the brain and say, oh, thank you. I can trust you. I feel safe here. So benefits, immediate skin to skin, no cord clamping, slower transition, no jumping on the baby. I never touch a baby except to occasionally listen to the baby's lungs with a stethoscope. And when those eyes connect, it also turns on the pineal gland and it starts firing off neurotransmitters at 22 million per second that says, you made it, you're in a body. Now you have to switch over from getting your oxygen from the placenta. And while that cord is still intact, it's parallel circulation. You're getting blood from the placenta and you're starting to oxygenate the lungs. And then the baby goes like this. They breathe out and get rid of the carbon dioxide. They go, oh, hello, hello. And it sounds kind of like this. And I translate it into different languages when I teach. I love Chinese because the word for breathe in Chinese sounds like a breath. Arabic. In Hebrew, the word for God is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And so just look at around the world. I've been to 79 countries. I've seen birth in 79 cultures, language to a baby that's just come. They are not a blank slate because their brain has started wiring at 20 weeks of pregnancy. And so statistically, we see no problems with breathing, even if it takes a few more seconds. What's a typical? You might have to wait 20 more seconds or 30 more seconds for that first breath because the babies whose head is born first on the bed get stimulated right away before the body is out. And how long do I wait for that body to emerge? Till the peak of the next contraction or even the peak of the second contraction. There's no problem in waiting because the baby is programmed in its brain to fire off and eject itself. And the mother is programmed in her hormones to accept that huge surge of adrenaline and have that fetal ejection response coordinated with the babies. And so benefits for the baby, the removal of time, because babies don't wear watches. They're still a mystery to birth. And yes, we screen women for where's your placenta? And there's two things, Stephanie, that cause complications in labor. Do you want to know what they are?
Please share.
The first one is fear. What the mind thinks, the baby responds. The second one, and I think I'm going to put that one first, you must grow a healthy placenta. You're not growing the baby. The baby is going to grow by itself. It's going to take all the nutrients that it needs, but the health and vitality of that baby is based on a healthy placenta. So you want to feed the placenta so it can feed the baby. And so that means that the second area of complication is food or lack of food in this fast food culture that is not nourishing placentas. And this is where we see complications.
Nutrition.
It's nutrition. Food and fear are the two major complications of labor and birth, of pregnancy. We look at all of the intricacies the Creator knew was necessary to make us healthy, vibrant, completely formed individuals who are dependent from 20 weeks of pregnancy to the end of the 7th year on a regulatory system of our caregivers, our regulatory system and the developing immune system. We feed the immune system by swallowing all of that vaginal bacteria. I was in a hospital in Beijing, China. The year was 2014, and I'm in the delivery room, dressed fully like it's COVID time, because they think birth has to be sterile. Birth does not have to be sterile. It must be clean. And even so, I have films from northern China of women giving birth in glass or on the savannah on dirt floors, and they give birth leaning over dung containers because that's what they burn for fuel. So it has to be within the microbiology and the system that is good for this mother and this baby. So the baby swallows all that bacteria, but in the hospital, they were taking the antibacterial formulas and dipping the cloth in and scrubbing the inside of the vagina and scrubbing the outside of the vagina. And that's how I learned to do birth in the 70s in the hospital. And so the practices that we have developed for protection, listening to every single heartbeat, I agree with some things that when there are complications of the growth and development of the fetus, we want to protect that baby and create a healthy birth for mother and baby. But there's so much more. There's so much more than just the health of the mother and the baby. So I think that the biggest benefits for baby are realizing that the baby is the driver of the experience, the necessity to emerge in a relaxed body, in a state of mind that welcomes every single contraction with a sense of gratitude. And yes, we can have fear. We don't have to take the fear away, but we have to develop a serious amount of courage to be able to let go and let the baby do the work that's necessary to wire the brain. You wouldn't cut a chrysalis open to let the butterfly out because the butterfly would drop to the ground and die. And this whole thought that we have to stimulate the labor, we can't let babies go past 39 weeks, we have to manipulate the woman's body in order to keep it safe is that is total, utter bullshit. And the more women understand how miraculous their bodies are and how talented the baby is, it's like, I know what to do. Trust me. Trust my body. Trust the baby. Trust the process. And most of all, trust the designer of the process. And water birth gave us that gift.
We've been speaking today with Barbara Harper, the foremost expert in water birth. Her 2005 book, Gentle Birth Choices, sold more than 32,000 copies, and who knows how much
Oh,
more since then. And you're currently working on 2 more books that we're excited to see when they come out. Barbara, can you let people know how to find out more about Water Birth International and about all of your work?
yes. The book that's coming out in 2025 is The Essential Guide to Water Birth, 40 Years of Clinical Practice and Research Evidence. And that's my lectures. You can find my schedule on barbaraharper.org, and you can learn more about water birth on waterbirth.org. The second book is Gentle Birth Wisdom, the wisdom of the ages from the beginning to the 21st century.
Thank
So,
you so much for being here today, Barbara. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
and you as well. Thank you for inviting me and letting me share some of my enthusiasm about changing the way we welcome new human beings into their bodies here on Earth.
Take care, Barbara. Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast, or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.